Most topics with woodworking have, at this point, been covered very, very deeply on YouTube. If you search for normal stuff, normal concerns, then you're going to find a lot of videos on them. So one of the ways that I felt like I wanted to contribute on YouTube, and the fact that I even did the channel in the first place, is that if I kind of stumbled upon something that I felt was a little bit different, or as an idea that hasn't been fully explored or hasn't been explored at all, then that was just a great opportunity for me to just add to the overall knowledge pool. And I felt good about that. This is one of those ideas. I don't think it's been covered yet, so bear with me, and I'm just going to show you quickly what it is. It's just a little bit more of an accurate way of sanding a cutting board, or sanding any flat surface, really. So this was my problem. Cutting boards are supposed to be easy to do, but you know, really they're not. They're not for me. One of the main challenges is getting in wood anyway, and this time I'm using softwood, so actually the difficulty has gone up a little bit. The main challenge is to maintain two flat surfaces, continually go through all the grits of sanding and all the sanding procedures, and get it down to as smooth a surface as you can. This time I was using cedar. I straight up just had a cedar, one of those cedar 4x4 posts, and I glued it together into an end grain cutting board, and I went through the procedure of, first I flattened it on a router sled. Actually, I used the CNC to do it because effectively it's a router sled. I went through the sanding procedure first with a belt sander. I got a lot of tear out, first of all, which is normal for such a low density wood as such as cedar. And I started using the belt sander to do the initial sort of smoothing before I went to a random orbital sander. And this is what I did. I was very relaxed, and you know, I only used the weight of the belt sander. I felt like I had all best practices as far as using a belt sander. So really only just using the weight of the tool, you know, trying to be as even and mechanical as I could. And in the end, I just totally got my ass handed to me. There was so many dips and waves, and it was really just due to slight, you know, miscalculations in where I was, or slightly endoing the tool a little bit. So after that, I kind of freaked out a little bit. I'm like, what the hell do I have to do to maintain flatness using the belt sander? And basically what I ended up doing was I kind of rigged up a very quick attachment to an old linear sled that I had. And you know, a lot of people use these types of rail systems for their router sleds. This is actually pretty popular. This stuff is pretty cheap now. It's not dirt cheap, but it's fairly cheap, and it makes for a very accurate router sled for flattening. And I used to use it before I had a CNC. I used to use it for a router sled. I thought, well, why not just attach the belt sander to the router sled? And I did, and I ended up getting some decent results for you. I'm gonna show you basically what the procedure is. You can imagine what it's going to be like, but I'm going to show you how I modified this belt sander and attached it to this. And maybe if you're having the same problems, this will be helpful to you. That's my main goal here, is to, you know, just throw out another idea, something else to try if you're running into problems. So what I've done to this belt sander is basically this plate. This is the Makita belt sander. It's pretty popular. Basically, this plate underneath this comes off. So I drilled 2 bolt holes in it. I attached this piece of plywood, and then I further attached 2 1/4-20 bolts to this. So I have a little mounting arm here. So basically, with these 2 bolts, that allows me to attach it to this guy, and I have a little grooves here so it can ride up and down. And what's going to happen is it keys in here, and I can just sort of sit it on the material, lock these bolts down, and then start the sanding. If you ever do this, one tip is you can just sort of rest the flatness of the belt sander on the material, and that sets your height. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be too fancy. Originally I was thinking some fancy height mechanism. The good thing about this plate, this part of the Makita sander, is this is all 90 degrees to the bed. So as long as you build all this stuff 90 degrees, you're all good. So I just built this on, and again, it's just kind of in the perfect position because it's just the weight of the tool. And then once it's on, I can do all the sanding, and I'll show that in a few minutes. So when I have to move to the orbital sander for all the fine sanding passes, I created a little arm that captures this. This sander is actually broken right now, but it still runs, but the motor is just completely shot, or the brushes or something's happening. I built another arm for this guy. Goes in the exact same way. I just rest it down in the material, bolt it down, and then I can do a pass. Whenever I'm using an orbital sander by hand, I kind of know what the best practices are. Really, you want to glide it across. You want to not put too much. You don't want to be grinding down like this. You want to keep it flat to the surface, and you just want the weight of the tool and let the sandpaper do its work, right? So you want to be very relaxed and being as even as you can. But it always happens, like I'm not a robot as far as my spatial sense of what plane is in line with everything, right? So, and then sometimes you can't resist, like if you see an area that's a little bit funky, you're just going to go on the edge and kind of endo it a little bit, and that gives you a little bit more grinding power, and then you're causing dips, so you're losing flatness, right? So this kind of device just keeps you totally honest through the whole process. You can force it a little bit, but if you just relax with this, it's far more accurate method of sanding. It's going to be very even in this plane, and that's really the main, or one of the main, there's a lot of challenges with cutting boards, actually. I find them very difficult. You want to keep that flat surface, and there's a lot of, with so many passes of sanding, there's a lot of opportunity to create peaks and valleys. And I like using softwood, actually. I've only made a few of them, but I'm just loving using softwood. I just find it so, the grain patterns are so interesting. It's good, it's nice on the knife, but to have good interactivity with your knife, like pretend this was the knife, you want a flat surface, otherwise there's going to be a gully, and some herb or something you're chopping is not going to get chopped because there's a cavity there. So ideally flat as possible, right? Right now I'm going to show you the whole procedure that I've been using, all the steps that I take, and you can decide for yourself whether this is something that you can use for yourself in the future. Again, maybe you have all this stuff lying around already and you just want a slightly more accurate method of sanding. Maybe your sanding is working well for you. I'm sure you'll just continue on in that case. But if you're getting frustrated with the results, then maybe this is something you can try. So the first thing I did is just use a router sled method, but in this case, because I have it, I'm using a CNC, and I've got a decent surfacing bit. So I run my flattening passes. The surface is decent, but there's still gouges, there's still a little bit of tear out. This could get way worse with a less quality bit. So there is definitely some sanding to do. It's not a perfect surface off a CNC or a router sled. After that, I attach the board to the sanding sled. I'm going to start off with the belt sander, and I'm going to use 80 grit, and that's just going to create the initial sort of mush that get the surface ready for the random orbital sander. With the random orbital sander, once I attach that, I'm going to go through 3 grits. I'm going to do 80 again, and then I'm going to go to 120, and then finally I'm going to end up at 180. And then after that, I'm going to do a water pop. I'm going to spray it down with water and let it lift some of the fibers, and then I'm going to do 180 again. If I've successfully removed every scratch pattern before that, it should be a pretty smooth board. If I may be so bold, I think this has to be one of the hardest materials. See, if you go into hardwoods, like I've seen videos of people doing maple end grain boards and comparing it to sanding cement, or it's just so hard to sand. That has its own challenges, but the end grain of maple is just so tight. You've got that on your side, even though you're in for a lot of sanding. With something like cedar, it is just so prone to just ripping apart and could easily be so gouged. It's possible to get it to a silky smooth finish, and it's actually really satisfying to see it like that. It's nice and soft on a knife. You know, it's interesting. I know the conventional wisdom says always make your cutting boards out of hardwood, but you know, it's a neat alternative. And I guess if you're a woodworker, maybe, I don't know. I've had some softwood. I had a softwood board upstairs that I was really happy with how it worked out. It's got knife marks all over it, but it looks really cool, and it's just been a nice experience. So I want to make some more of these out of softwood. But cedar has been the most challenging. I've got my ass handed to me so many times with this, and I think I finally, after being really careful and respectful of what it is, I've got it down to the point where it is really smooth. So that's it. If you're getting a lot of dips and valleys throughout your sanding process, you're having trouble maintaining flatness through the whole process, then maybe consider something like this. There's all kinds of ways you could do it with simpler sleds. But again, a lot of people have these linear rails. They're very popular, and it's fairly simple attachment to make. I'll probably make the plans available for this. This is all SBR 16 millimeter stuff, which I think is one of the most popular ones. I'll try and make these plans available on my website eventually, and it's just simple drawings, but it gives you a starting point to work from, and maybe some instructions on how to quickly mod the Makita sander as well. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.